The search for survivors presses on. Well, this after a Russian missile slammed into an apartment building over the weekend. At least 30 people were killed and dozens of others are still missing. Many are holding out hope for more scenes like this. The rescue of a woman from the rubble following Saturday's strike. But Dnipro's mayor is acknowledging the harsh reality.
I think the chances of saving people now are minimal. My version is that the missile hit the building because there's a thermal station across the river, meaning they tried to hit the thermal station, but the missile flew by and hit residential buildings.
While Ukraine's president says the search will go on as long as there is a chance to save lives. And yet this message for Russians remaining silent amid the violence.
I want to say to all those in Russia and from Russia who even now could not utter a few words of condemnation of this terror, although they see and comprehend everything perfectly. Your cowardly silence, your attempt to wait out what is happening, will only end with the fact that one day these same terrorists will come for you.
Well, CNN's Fred Pleitgen traveled to the scene of the Russian missile strike in Dnipro. He reports on the devastation left behind and the desperate search for survivors.
The scene apocalyptic as rescuers frantically sift through the debris, searching for survivors, the hope of finding any fading by the second as the cold night progresses. For some, the grief is too much to handle. Olha Nevenchanaya says she passed by this building only about half an hour before it was hit. There are many friends and people close to me here. Many, she says. Olena Loyan, stunned by the scale of the destruction, curses the Russians. I simply hate them. Children, people died here, and then she can't speak anymore. On top of the many killed, Ukrainian authorities say dozens were injured and many more remain missing in just this one location in Dnipro, after Russia hit sites across Ukraine with barrages of missiles this weekend. The Ukrainians say they are absolutely certain that the missile that hit this building was a so-called KH-22. That's a cruise missile normally designed to destroy aircraft carriers with a warhead of more than 2,000 pounds. And as you can see, it absolutely annihilated the building, burying dozens of people underneath. Russia has not directly commented on the deadly strike at Dnipro, but in the past, Moscow has denied its forces target residential areas. The Ukrainians call the attack state terrorism, and the president says rescuers will continue to try and save anyone trapped here. Let's fight for every person, President Zelensky says. The rescue operation will last as long as there is even the slightest chance to save a life. But even the slightest hope is fading fast, and this could soon turn from a rescue into a recovery operation. The crews searching for bodies where so many lives were violently ended in an instant. For Pleitgen, CNN, Dnipro, Ukraine.
Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the battle for Soledar and Bakhmut continues nonstop in the east. Ukraine's army on Sunday said it fired rockets toward Russian troops as they tried to storm Ukrainian positions around Bakhmut. Well, this comes days after Russia claimed to have taken control of the nearby town of Soledar. Moscow's defense ministry says it did so with the help of the private military company Wagner. But the group's boss insists his mercenaries deserve all the credit.
Firstly, Wagner mercenaries have been fighting for many years. They may be the most experienced army there is today in the world. Secondly, they fulfill all the tasks on their own. They have warplanes. There are heroic pilots who don't fear to perish. They have multiple launch rocket systems of all types. There are air defense systems which have downed a huge amount of enemy planes. They have artillery systems of all calibers, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles.
Joining me now to discuss this topic is Rajan Menon, a director of the Grant Strategy Program at Defense Priorities and Professor Emeritus of International Relations for City College of New York. Sir, thank you for taking our questions. Let's start with the role that the Wagner Group plays in the war. What does their prominence tell you about the fitness of Russia's own military in this fight?
Well, Russia's problem is that it set out to conquer what, setting aside Russia, is the largest country in all of Europe, namely Ukraine. And it is about the fifth or sixth largest in population. They had the armor and the oomph and the missiles and the howitzers and all that to do it, but not the necessary number of troops, and only troops, the infantry, can take and hold land. So they ran into difficulty. So we have the Wagner Group enter. Lately, they've been prominent in two places: in the Ukrainian control area, Republic of Donetsk, the province of Donetsk, Soledar and Bakhmut, and they have been prominent in that battle, but they're vying with the regular Russian armed forces for credit as to who really is doing most of the fighting and winning in both places.
Who is the man behind the Wagner Group? What can you tell us about his relationship with the Russian army and with Vladimir Putin himself?
His name is Yevgeny Prigozhin. He's 61 years old. He spent some time in a Soviet prison. After the fall of the Soviet Union, he went into the catering and restaurant business, made a lot of money, became a close associate of President Putin, which he still is. And although he didn't found the Wagner Group's name is now associated with him. It is essentially his private army that he runs through money that he raises in various ways, including by using the group as mercenaries in different parts of the world: Syria, Libya, the Central African Republic, to name but a few. But they are now active in the fight in eastern Ukraine, but they were also first involved in Ukraine in 2014.
And his star is on the rise right now.
Well, he certainly seems to think so. I mean, he does not criticize President Putin, but it would not surprise me if he has contemplated the possibility one day of a post-Putin political order. And he is certainly one of those positioning himself to demonstrate that he is a patriotic leader, that he is a military leader, that he has won victories for Russia. That is partly what the Wagner operation in Ukraine is all about.
So would you say that they act and he acts with the blessing of Putin?
You know, that is a very interesting question. The lines of communication are murky as between him and Putin. He certainly wouldn't be doing it if Putin disapproved. One doesn't do that in Russia. The relationship between the Russian intelligence services and the professional army in the Wagner Group are somewhat more difficult to discern, because on the one hand, there must be coordination. On the other hand, lately, they have clearly made it clear that they are not allies and, in fact, see themselves as rivals in this war.
Now, you just pointed out, I mean, the official, you have on the one hand, you have an official army and this private for-hire army, the Wagner Group. It's not always clear whether they are always in competition or whether they complement each other. Are they essentially different actors, just both vying for Putin's favor at this stage?
Well, both are true. In the battles in Soledar and Bakhmut, Bakhmut being the bigger and more consequential town, they have try to achieve the same mission, that is to conquer both these towns. But when it comes to the question of who is doing better and who deserves the credit for the recent gains in Soledar, Bakhmut they have not taken, then clearly Prigozhin wants to claim credit. The military does not want to have him claim credit because, after all, they're a professional military and they see fighting for Russia as their business.
So, you know, to turn our focus back to the Russian army, you know, not able to deliver a victory because the objective was never been clearly defined, is that the problem?
Well, it is, one thing is clear, and that is that Mr. Putin clearly did not set out to conquer all of Ukraine. My best sense is that he wanted to, and he began this way, make a drive south to Kiev, take over the capital, change the government, control the northern part of Ukraine, and hive off probably as much more of the east as he could. He already held some territory there by virtue of the statelets that he created in 2014, and the south. But Ukraine, being such a large country, even achieving that requires manpower that the Russian army proved not to have. This is why you have private armies such as the Wagner Group and also of the Chechen leader, come warlord Ramzan Kadyrov, whose fighters have also been active in the war in Ukraine.
Rajan Menon, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.